So Sam has seen half an hour of Alan Wake 2. Now, so the first game was an action horror game, and this game is following much more of a recent trend of survival horror, at least it looks like from the trailers. And yet what you've seen has another element to it that we haven't seen yet.
So I saw half an hour of gameplay from the new character, Saga Anderson, who is an FBI agent who's coming in to investigate a series of ritualistic murders in the area of Bright Falls and 2 other locations that you'll go to. But it's also introducing a load of different gameplay mechanics. So because she's an FBI agent and they want to explain that she's really freaking good at her job, you can go into her mind space, very Sherlock Holmes and everything else, yeah. Mind Palace. I think it's called the mind space as a distinction.
Trademarked by the Conan Doyle Foundation.
But it's really interesting. So you can go into her mind and you can take all of the clues that you found along the way, but it's almost like that Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where she's like putting the clues on the board and literally seeing the strings appear to then progress the mission story.
So it does help you to a certain extent, where if you pin something on a board, it will go, well done, these 2 are linked.
Yeah.
You might not, do you know how they're linked? Does it tell you that? Or you just go, okay, that is a connection there.
Yeah, I did ask them, like, can you get it wrong?
Yeah.
And they were very like, we're not ready to talk about that yet, but but it would suggest that, like, basically the story is kind of gated to you finding the clues and then connecting them. So for example, at one point she knows that she needs to go to a cabin and she needs to find a fuse. Until she knows she needs the fuse, if you come across one, you wouldn't have been able to pick it up because, like, you don't know you need it at that point. Whereas later she finds out that she needs to do a kind of ritual in order to get into this space, sort of kind of between the dark place and the real world. And she needs a heart. But without the clue, she wouldn't have known that she needed the heart or been able to find it. It's very much more open world than the last game, which felt very linear and kind of...
I do hope it's a bit more tuned in. I'm aware this is a much older game, but the Phoenix Wright sagas, where, like, in that, you just had to get it right and keep guessing until you got it right, and you sometimes didn't even know why the answer was right in the court case. Whereas I hope it's a bit more like hand-holding. It seems a mix between that and, like, the Batman games, where it's a bit more like pointing you in a bit of a direction.
Yeah, because I think what happened was, like, she found, like, a manuscript on a tree, which she'd been led to by something that she found earlier.
Right.
So, like, the manuscripts pages that she finds that Alan is writing for her will be like, you need to find the witch and a heart and this tree. So you'll be like, okay, I know I need these 3 things, but maybe not how to get them yet. But
there are some trees over here. I'll go wander around.
and it's really interesting just the way that it kind of connects together, and it seems really smart the way that they've done it, and very much reminded me more of like LA Noire kind of style. Like, and it's interesting because she can also profile either the victims or, like, suspects. So she kind of goes into this sort of meditative state, and then the characters will come to life and talk to her.
These are like 2 different games.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, fair play to them to be like, we're going to make an Alan Wake game, but a large part of it, or maybe even half of it, is a very different game.
Her side of things is very much, she's being called the co-protagonist, so it's very much as her game as it is Alan's. Obviously you will still play as Alan, who's been in the dark place for 13 years and has probably gone a little bit mental by this point, but
he's also created Saga Anderson.
Yeah, potentially.
Oh god, this game.
This is very much like, and having spoken to Sam Lake and the other co-creators and developers about this game, they have very much enjoyed embedding this game with loads of lore and connective tissues between this and Quantum Break and the first game and Control and everything else. So it's really, I think, the more you dive into this, the more research I did before this trip about, like, Saga Anderson is a character that's appeared before, and so has Alex Casey, her partner, and anyway, there's a lot of connected stuff here.
If you feel lost when you're looking at any of the trailers, or even if you start playing Alan Wake 2, do not worry about feeling lost. That is weirdly part of it.
But it's quite interesting because they've also pitched Saga Anderson as, like, the newcomer to this game in the same way that a lot of people will be coming to this game as their first kind of Remedy game. So she finds manuscript pages attached to the bodies and in the world as she's exploring. So then comes in Alan's voice and sort of explains the connective tissues between the world that he's in and the world that she's investigating. So it's quite nice, even when you're playing as Saga, you've still got Alan coming in every now and then being like, and she found the book and opened the book in his sort of writerly tone that he's always had. So there's kind of, that's nice, but is also, she's like, oh, okay, so if light seemed to work against these characters, maybe I'll use the torch. And So you don't need to have played Alan Wake
good.
1 technically, or Control, or any of the other Remedy games. So yeah, and it's really cool because they've still connected her with the sort of traditional Alan Wake experience. So she obviously has a torch because she's investigating things, but you can bring it up whenever you want to. So and she's obviously learning about how the light can impact the dark, and she's dealing with these cult members who also are protected by darkness in the same way as the enemies from the first game. So she obviously has to shine the light on them to get rid of their barrier, which is much more kind of body horror than I expected it to be. It's not, they're not going full gore with like dismemberment and stuff. Dead Space. But yeah, but if you shoot someone, there's blood and they'll be like impacted and stuff, which is definitely felt like an upgrade on the original game. But there's quite nice tie-ins as well, because like, do you remember like when you could stand in like the lamppost light and it would like regen your health and stuff? So you can stand in the light and it heals you, but it'll only take you out of like critical state, and then you've got to then think about, oh, do I need to take some painkillers to boost my health to get back into combat? And you can only use the lamppost safe haven once per combat round, so you've got to kind of decide whether to use it now.
And then even when you do use it, it's only bringing you up to like,
and then you've still got to like buff yourself. So you're much more like Resident Evil. There's and you've got your bag with like inventory slots. And do you remember the flasks from the first game as well?
Vaguely.
They were like, there was 100 or something to collect in the original game. Whereas
that's why I vaguely remember, because I was like, nope.
They're just silly collectibles, and I think they were a bit like, well, we're not going to make people do that again, so we'll make them like safe markers instead. So you'll go into a house and find a flask, and that's when you'll be able to actually at certain points switch between Saga and Alan, because between the sections last time, all your ammo and your guns would reset in the original Alan Wake. It's really weird going back to it now and being like, I had a shotgun a minute ago, why have I got to pick it up now? Whereas this is much more like, you can put your stuff in a safe box at these safe points and you've got it. Whereas like when you're out and about, you've got to like obviously judge your ammo and make sure that you've got everything that you need, and also monitor your health. You're not going to get points where it just kind of automatically regens. It's much more, again,
a management system.
Much more horror. And about pacing as well, because like the original game was quite relentless with its combat, whereas they've admitted this has got a lot less combat in it than the first game, but the combat that you do encounter will be much more momentous and
have meaning,
really scary as well. Like there's a lot of jump scares in this, and
it already looks claustrophobic as hell.
And it's like and it's beautiful. Like even just looking at the forest as you're walking around, like it's stunning the way the sort of trees and dapple, and they're using weather in really like moody atmospheric ways, which is really cool. So it definitely feels like a real next gen game in terms of how
because the original 100%. Was 2010.
13 years ago, which is madness. But it's this. I'm really excited about this game. I feel like it's got enough of the original in there to, you know, make me as an original Alan Wake fan like really excited about it. But then there's this other layer of like what Saga's bringing to the table and how the two connect. And obviously we saw at the end of that gameplay trailer about, you know, she's going to meet Alan, or is it Alan? We don't know. So it's really interesting, and I'm super excited by it.
So the game's coming out on October 17th.
Because and speaking to them as well, it was interesting to see that they've been trying to make this game for 13 years, and like one iteration turned into Quantum Break, and one iteration turned into Control, and now this is like, if you want to go deep in Remedy games, like you can go deep, and they said that they had a lot of fun.
Lore, oh my god,
there's so much lore and so many like interconnections. If you go on the Alan Wake Reddit, like it's just glorious with like kind of lore divers going into like, what could this mean, and what does her name mean Anderson, or Saga and her son.
Alan Wake is one of the few like universes where all those things could be true, because it's 100%. Such a, like all these other games, you're like, man, you've gone way too down into that rabbit hole. But Alan Wake is a rabbit hole. That is literally the point of it. It's just so mental.
This is something new. Like Alan's got obviously a lot of baggage. He's a man who's been through a lot, but also there's this new character to kind of balance that madness and the darkness as well. With like, and she's really funny as well. Like she was like commenting at one point on the cult. She's like, what kind of cult calls himself the cult? Like it's really weird. And then she kind of like,
she is the self-referential like straight man to this, just be like, this is all mental.
Because like replaying the original Alan Wake is like, it's kind of like cringy how kind of rightly he speaks all the time, and like but it's fun, and I think she is much more straight talking, much more like the voice of the player to balance that out, which is really cool. And it sounds like she's got her own history and ties to this place as well. They're saying that she has Finnish roots, so she's exploring her connection to this place as well. So whether she's a manifestation of Alan's script or whatever, or a real person who is connected to this, because there's a new area of Watery which has like Finnish folklore collections, which is really interesting. Connections rather, not collections. So I think their Remedy team are also bringing in their own roots into this like a very American kind of southwestern thing as well, which is hopefully even more interesting for the kind of horrible things that they can tell through like classic folklore and stuff. So
can't wait.
Yeah, lots of different levels, much scarier, much more survival horror in terms of like the gameplay style, much more tense, and also just like, I think this is going to be a really interesting game for people who like detective games, but also people who love Remedy games as well.
Seems like it's been worth the wait.
Hell yeah.
Let us know in the comments down below what your favourite Alan Wake theory or like crazy thing that you think is going to happen is, because I bet you there are some mental ones out there that you've seen. And subscribe to GamesRadar for any new information on Alan Wake 2 and the review when it does eventually come out.